The Rhythm of Time by Bobby Sands. There's an inner thing in every man. Do you know this thing, my friend? It has withstood the blows of 1,000,000 years, and will do so to the end. It was born when time did not exist, and it grew out of life. It cut down evil, strangling vines, like a slashing, searing knife. It lit fires when fires were not, and burned the mind of a man, tempering leaden hearts to steel, from the time that time began. It wept by the waters of Babylon, and when all men were a loss, it screeched in writhing agony, and it hung bleeding from the cross. It died in Rome by lion and sword, and in defiant cruel array, when the deathly word was Spartacus along the Appian way. It marched with what the tireless poor, and frightened lord and king, and was emblazoned in their deathly stare, as e'er a living thing. It smiled in holy innocence before conquistadors of old, so meek and tame and unaware of the deathly power of gold. It burst forth through pitiful Paris streets, and stormed the old Bastille, and marched upon the serpent's head, and crushed it 'neath its heel. It died in blood on buffalo plains, and starved by moons of rain. Its heart was buried in wounded knee, but it would come to rise again. It screamed aloud by Kerry Lakes, as it was knelt upon the ground, and it died in great defiance, as they coldly shut it down. It is found in every light of hope. It knows no bounds nor space. It has risen in red and black and white. It is there in every race. It lies in the hearts of heroes dead. It screams in torrents' eyes. It has reached the peak of mountains high. It comes searing across the skies. It lights the dark of this prison cell. It thunders forth its might. It is the undauntable thought, my friend, that thought that says, I'm right.
Hey, 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 John, hey. That's a tree, boy. Hey, 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 just hey. I would like to welcome everyone who has joined us today as we commemorate all those that dedicated and gave their lives for the cause of national liberation and socialism in Ireland. This year marks a very special anniversary as we remember the 10 men who gave their lives in 1981 hunger strike, and also the 40th anniversaries of Jim Power and Matt McLarnon. I would like to begin the proceedings by calling for the reefs. The RSP first, please. Staff and volunteers of the Irish National Liberation Army. A reef from the Arcolia as well. And any other one. Former Republican Socialist prisoner to lay a reef in memory of the 1981 hunger strike and all those who fought in the prison struggle in Ireland. Ron, go on in. Run! I call for a minute's silence on the lowering of the flags. Run! Run! Let her run! We will now go to Derry, where the Roll of Honour will be read, followed by a statement from the Republican Socialist Youth Movement.
National Liberation Army volunteers: Hugh Ferguson, Danny Loughren, Brendan McNamee, Ronnie Traynor, Thomas Costello, Colin McNutt, Tommy Traynor, Tony McClelland, Marion Daly, Ronnie Button, Noel Little, Jim Power, Matt McLaren, Patsy O'Hara, Kevin Lynch, Mickey Devine, Roddy Carroll, Seamus Grey, Neil McMonagle, Brendan Convery, Jared Mallon, Joe Craven, Paul McCann, Thomas Tab Power, John O'Reilly, Mickey Kearney, Emmanuel Gargan, Kevin Barry Duffy, James McDonough, Alex Patterson, Gino Gallagher, John Morris, John McColgan, Patrick Campbell, Colin Murray, Davy McNutt, Christopher Crick McWilliams, Patsy Tiernan, Seamus Chan Coyle, Billy Brown, Declan McGlinchey, Harry O'Hara, Barry Bass McMullen, Martin McElkearney, Stephen Clark. POW, Colin Maguire. Comrades: Rose Campbell, Hugh O'Neill, Michael Montgomery, Mary McGlinchey, Dominic McGlinchey, Dermot McShane, Hesse Phelan, Anthony Dorn, Mickey Red Doherty, Myra White, Johnny White, Dennis Murphy, Sean Fleming, Jared Anderson, John Cassidy, Peggy O'Hara, Anthony Click McClelland, Joe Armstrong, Bridget Makowski, Johnny McGilway, Sean McCafferty, David Ward, Seamus O'Kane, Tony Friel, Anthony Fessy, Seamus McLaughlin, Josephine Kelly, Matt Kerr, Frankie Callahan, Norman Goldsby, John Ward, Kevin Kelly, Mickey Mooney, John Dean, Ronnie Maguire, Jack Montgomery, Jackie Power, Peter Kyle, Jared McGahey and
Kieran Murphy, Derry RSYM. For the second year in a row, the coronavirus pandemic has prevented us from having an in-person commemorative Easter March, though this will not prevent us from remembering our fallen volunteers with pride. In Ireland, 105 years ago, a band of revolutionary Republican socialists set out to take on the British imperialism and become martyrs. The message and goal of the rising remains embodied in the Irish Republican Socialist movement. There can be no better tribute to the brave men and women of 1916 than to continue the struggle for socialism and sovereignty in Ireland, than to pick up from when they left off 100 years ago. 100 years on from the partition in Ireland, unity is gathering more and more traction and support by the day. The sectarian statelites' days are numbered. The Irish Republican Socialist movement have been working tirelessly in our communities to represent and fight for the working class. We owe our allegiance to the working class. We will
now go to Dublin, where a member will read out the international statement.
Comrades, I would like to take this opportunity to send greetings to all oppressed people struggling for national liberation and socialism around the world. We send greetings to all those in prison for their actions in oppressing unjust regimes, and especially our Catalan and Palestinian brothers and sisters. The Irish Republican Socialist Party sends support to anti-imperialist comrade George Abdallah and will continue to act for his immediate release from a French prison. The movement of Connolly and Costello, the Irish Republican Socialist Party, has made great leaps in our international connections over the last 12 months. We have turned our outlook outwards to struggles happening all over the European continent and beyond. We have learned important lessons from our experiences. The ultimate lesson is the working class will eventually rise up and defend its own interests. The benefit of our international experience has been to build unity within republicanism at home and engage with one another. These concepts of unity and collective activism far outweigh any negatives. Building relationships while breaking down any existing preconceptions fostered by state-backed propaganda campaigns, inter-organisational conflict, and dispelling gossip and identifying issues of mutual agreement must be at the forefront. We send solidarity to our comrades in Scotland and Wales as they continue to build towards independence and socialism. Tens of thousands of people have been mobilised for a free Scotland, and our Welsh comrades are beginning the process of mobilisation, beginning in Cardiff soon. We stand by our Breton brothers and sisters in their struggle for an independent Breton socialist state. The Irish Republican Socialist Party supports the right of other working class people living in subjugation as a result of control and exploitation by capitalist interests at home and abroad to take whatever means they deem necessary to establish national self-determination and democracy. The Irish Republican Socialist Party will engage with other socialist political parties, including those already engaged in struggles of resistance, to build networks of political opposition in the interests of working class people everywhere. Saoirse, good job.
We will now go to Belfast, where we will read out the 1916 proclamation.
Irish men and Irish women, in the name of God and of the dead generations from which she receives her old tradition of nationhood, Ireland, through us, summons her children to her flag and strikes for her freedom. Having organised and trained her manhood through her secret revolutionary organisation, the Irish Republican Brotherhood, and through her open military organisations, the Irish Volunteers and the Irish Citizen Army, having perfectly perfected her discipline, having resolutely waited for the right moment to reveal itself, she now seizes that moment, and supported by her exiled children in America and by gallant allies in Europe, but relying in the first on her own strengths, she strikes in full confidence of victory. We declare the right of the people of Ireland to the ownership of Ireland and to the unfettered control of Irish destinies, to be sovereign and indefeasible. The long usurpation of that right by a foreign people and government has not extinguished the right, nor can it ever be extinguished except by the destruction of the Irish people. In every generation, the Irish people have asserted their right to national freedom and sovereignty. 6 times during the past 300 years, they have asserted it in arms. Standing on that fundamental right, and again asserting it in arms in the face of the world, we hereby proclaim the Irish Republic as a sovereign, independent state, and we pledge our lives and the lives of our comrades in arms to the cause of its freedom, of its welfare, and of its exaltation among the nations. The Irish Republic is entitled to and hereby claims the allegiance of every Irish man and Irish woman. The Republic guarantees religious and civil liberty, equal rights and equal opportunities to all its citizens, and declares its resolve to pursue the happiness and prosperity of the whole nation and of all its parts, cherishing all the children of the nation equally and oblivious of the differences carefully fostered by an alien government, which have divided a minority from the majority in the past, until our arms have brought the opportune moment for the establishment of a permanent national government, representative of the whole people of Ireland, and elected by the suffrage of all her men and women. The provisional government hereby constituted will administer the civil and military affairs of the Republic in trust for the people. We place the cause of the Irish Republic under the protection of the Most High God, whose blessing we invoke upon our arms, and we pray that no one who serves that cause will dishonour it by cowardice, inhumanity, or rapine. In this supreme hour, the Irish nation must, by its valour and discipline, and by the readiness of its children to sacrifice themselves for the common good, prove itself worthy of the august destiny to which it is called. Signed on behalf of the Provisional Government, Thomas J. Clarke, Sean McDermott, Padraig Pearse, James Connolly, Thomas McDonough, Eamon Cant, Joseph Plunkett.
We will now go to Michael Kelly to read this year's main oration.
Friends and comrades, I would like to welcome you to our online Easter commemoration for 2021. Normally, the Republican Socialist family gather at the gravesides of our comrades every year to honour our fallen martyrs in their traditional Republican way. But sadly, due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, that simply isn't possible this year. We will nonetheless pay tribute to all those who have made the ultimate sacrifice in the pursuit of an Irish Workers' Republic in a fitting and appropriate manner in the present circumstances. We thank all the families of our comrades for their patience and understanding as we again commemorate their selfless sacrifice differently this year. We will do so differently, but no less meaningful. We will never allow such circumstances to prevent us from remembering our fallen comrades. We will always honour their memories and the political ideals for which they gave their lives, but we will do so respecting the best scientific advice in order to keep our membership and the wider community safe. Not only do we commemorate the members of the Republican Socialist family who lost their lives during the latest phase of the conflict, we remember all those brave volunteer soldiers who stepped forward on Easter Monday morning 1916 in Dublin as members of the Irish Citizen Army, Common Man or the Irish Volunteers. They bravely took to the streets of Dublin to strike at the British in the heart of that empire's second city. Those events were a turning point in the struggle for Irish freedom and nationhood. The joint effort by that wide range of Republicans, nationalists, trade unionists, socialists and many ordinary people could arguably be described as the first broad front in modern Irish republicanism. Those events sparked a desire for freedom rarely seen outside of the Republican and Irish cultural organisations of that time. Let us ask ourselves, why did these brave fighters decide to take on the might of the British Empire in the knowledge that they had little chance of victory and that only death or imprisonment awaited them? They did it knowing that future generations of Irish people would take up the fight, and they succeeded in lighting the fuse that awakened the revolutionary spirit of the Irish people. They lit the flame of freedom and opposition to British rule in Ireland that inspired future generations to continue the struggle. During the past year, the Republican Socialist movement has had to adapt to very challenging circumstances. The global pandemic has changed the way we have operated as a revolutionary political organisation. We have been unable to organise gatherings such as meetings, demonstrations, protests or pickets, but this has made us no less effective. The Republican Socialist movement, through Republican Socialist Aid, has been to the forefront in providing frontline medical facilities and their staff with vital PPE during the early stages of the pandemic. Thousands of items such as masks, face screens and bottles of sanitizer were delivered to carers, care homes and hospitals right across Ireland when the system fell apart and was unable to offer protection to frontline workers. We also provided thousands of hot meals to isolating and vulnerable families, and we continue to provide food parcels to communities that have been left behind by the agencies who were funded to provide this service. This is real community empowerment, carried out by dedicated and committed activists from Derry to Cork. All of this was done solely by localised funding initiatives and donations from friends and supporters. This was simply an extension of the activism of our members. It was genuine revolutionary activity, and the leadership of this organisation is extremely proud of and grateful to the many activists who stepped forward during the current crisis. This activity stands in stark contrast to the gutter press headlines aimed at our membership by the PSNI and MI5. The difference between the headlines and the reality on the ground is testament to the high calibre of young activists within the IRSP. Genuine young men and women of our class who are driven to make life better for everyone in our communities. We are organised and active in dozens of working class communities right across Ireland, and the people who we helped and continue to help are our family, friends and neighbours. Ordinary working class people who have been let down by the system, both here in the occupied 6 counties and in the 26 county state. We send our unwavering support to the Yes for Unity campaign, which has continued to exert influence across the body politic, despite restrictions and lockdowns. Rather than filling halls of public meetings, the campaign has adapted and held very successful online public meetings, in a saying that despite not being able to meet, they have still been able to organise. Also, by working quietly in the background, engaging with people within our communities and beyond, and convincing them of the merits of supporting the calls for a border poll, they have continued to build support for the concept of a border poll. The campaign for such a poll is gaining momentum. Hardly a day goes by without someone new coming out in favour, and this, we have every confidence, will only grow as time moves. We believe it is inevitable, as the days pass, that there is more and more support for our stance. Our support for a referendum and the Yes for Unity campaign is simply one option on the long road to a republic. Presently, this looks the most likely way that partition can be dismantled. It is merely one option that may or may not work out. Let us be clear though, all our eggs are not in the border poll basket. If the border poll does not work out, we have other options that we will pursue. We are a revolutionary organisation, and we will continue to explore all revolutionary avenues. Nothing will ever be off the table in terms of achieving our aims. But we are also clear that campaigning for a border poll at this time does not dilute our revolutionary credentials one iota. In fact, it shows clearly that this movement is far-sighted and adaptable. This movement is not bound by traditions that can hinder our path to freedom. It never has been. Rather, we are guided by the core political principles of revolutionary socialism. These broad principles have served us well over the last 47 years. 40 years ago, our communities were in the midst of a real and deadly war with the British government led by Maggie Thatcher. Sick of seeing young men and women dragged away from their families and their homes and then held in the most atrocious conditions, a mass movement of ordinary working class people rose up in defence of the prisoners. Thousands came onto the streets across Ireland demanding better conditions for the POWs. Sadly, 10 of our comrades died within Longcash due to the outright bitterness of Thatcher, with more losing their lives on the outside. This year, we remember in particular volunteers Jim Power and Matt McLarnon, who died while in active service at the time of the hunger strike, and whose 40th anniversaries fall next month. 1981 was a horrendous period of our history. There was turmoil and despair on a daily basis, but this brought about awareness and an awakening among ordinary working class people. It was a time when people were becoming more and more aware that politics had a direct effect on their daily lives. The politics of the Thatcher-led government allowed our prisoners to die on protest, as their Tory killing machine privatised public services, throwing millions on the unemployed scrap heap and giving billions in profit to their supporters. Unfortunately, Thatcherism did not die with Thatcher. Privatisation is still a policy adopted by various government regimes. One of the bodies set up in 1971 in order to prevent discrimination in housing allocations was the Housing Executive. Historically, this body provided public housing across the 6 counties, and whilst not perfect, it is one of the publicly owned institutions that fulfills its role to all sides of the community equally. In recent years, the Housing Executive has come into the sights of privateers within government. The Department for Communities, which oversees the Housing Executive, has plans to privatise the organisation. Already, large parts of the responsibilities of the body have gone out to private housing associations. The ongoing plans to break up and privatise the Housing Executive are against everything that our communities have stood for. We must and we will oppose them. The first step in this process is to expose them, and that is what we are doing here. We are signalling our intention to oppose the privatisation of the housing executive and to win back their right to build quality social housing. That aspiration was taken away during the previous round of privatisation that brought about the private housing associations and allowed them into the social housing system in a big way. At the same time, the housing executive was barred from borrowing money to build new homes. This needs reversed as soon as possible. Private landlords across the north have been taking advantage of the current lack of social housing and the failed housing system, ramping up rents and exploiting loopholes in legislation that allows them to charge more than local benefit rates. This means that local families are forced to pay out of their already limited benefits in order to keep a roof over their heads. Currently, the IRSP are the only organisation highlighting this exploitation, and we have been doing so successfully. Several large private housing landlords have come under pressure from us and have changed their policies in this regard, meaning many families do not have to pay housing costs from their benefits. This campaign is ongoing, and where we find landlords exploiting vulnerable tenants, we will be there opposing their activities. Attacks on our class come in various forms, not just those out to make a quick profit whilst exploiting our communities. The British occupation has been baring its teeth in an attempt to keep the people down. We've witnessed over the last year heavy-handed tactics of the PSNI, aided and abetted by British security services such as MI5. Highly aggressive raids and incursions have taken place in Gallia, the Lower Falls, the Ormer Road, Craigan Estate and other areas. These have led to arrests, raids and neighbourhood lockdowns. Our people will not be intimidated. We have come through much worse, and we will do so again on the imperfect road to the Republic. The Republic envisioned by leaders such as James Connolly, our ideological forefather executed by the British establishment for his role in organising the Rising. He was first and foremost a revolutionary socialist, but within the Irish context he realised that the national freedom struggle had to take precedent at that time. We can clearly see the rationale in his last statement to the British court-martial which sentenced him to death. In it he says, "Believing that the British government has no right in Ireland, never had any right in Ireland, and never can have any right in Ireland." Connolly referred to the occupation of Ireland by the British as a crime against human progress that remains the case today as we strive to realise the ideals and objectives of that great man. The RSP believe that the Irish working class are the sole instrument in which we can achieve our goals. Only by working through them, by convincing them of our political programme, that our vision is their vision, that a Republican Socialist society is in their best interests, that our Republic is their Republic, that it will belong to them. Only then will we see the fruits of our labour. Comrades, political struggle is never easy. We must use Easter week to rededicate ourselves to the fight for an Irish Workers' Republic, to keep the flame of resistance alive. No matter how far away victory may seem, no matter how poorly our prospects look, never ever give up hope. Never stop educating, agitating and organising, for in the end victory is achievable. Turning to the proclamation and looking at the words proclaimed by Pearse at the GPO 105 years ago, we cannot be anything other than inspired and moved by the progressiveness and honesty of that proclamation. Given the period in which it was written, that document was years ahead of its time, with its affirmation of equality for all the people of Ireland, which was unheard of in the class system fostered upon us by the British ruling classes. Let us take heart from the proclamation and its authors. Let those who fought and died to make freedom a reality for the people of Ireland. Let us take it into our daily lives and live it ourselves. For indeed the establishment of the Republic and the ideals contained in the proclamation is the only fitting epitaph to the men and women of 1916 and their contemporaries who we have lost in the decades since. Let us truly treat all of the children of the nation equally. Let us fight poverty, discrimination, exploitation, homelessness, homophobia, racism, unfair water charges and tax breaks for the rich. Let us love our children. Let us help our elderly. Let us welcome those fleeing persecution. Let us house the homeless and provide all our people with a decent standard of living. Let us build a republic of equals, and as James Connolly said, our demands most moderate are, we only want the earth. Onwards to victory. Saoirse go Joe.
We will now go to Dungiven, where the Kevin Lynch Memorial Flute Band will round up today's commemoration with the national anthem.
Arise, ye workers, from ye slumber, arise, ye prisoners of one. For reason and revolt now thunders, and so ends the age of Can. Away with all your superstitions, servile masses, arise, arise. We'll break forth with the old traditions and spurn the dust to win the prize. So comrades, come rally, and the last fight we will face. The Internationale unites the human race. So comrades, come rally, and the last fight let us face. The Internationale unites the human race. We want no condescending saviors to rule us from their judgment hall. We workers ask not for their favours, let us consult for all, to make the thief disgorge his booty, to free the spirit from its cell. We must ourselves decide our duty, we must decide and do it well. So comrades, come rally, and the last fight let us face. The Internationale unites the human race. So comrades, come rally, and the last fight let us face. The Internationale unites the human race. C'est the lutte finale, reprenons et demain. L'International sera le jour humain. C'est the lutte finale, reprenons et demain. International sera le jour humain. Try and get this right. It's been a long time. Et to jest nasz последний решительный бой с Internationalом воспранят род людской. Это есть наш последний решительный бой с Internationalом воспранят род людской. До свидания, товарищ.